We'll find out.
Do it live. Whole thing sucks.
Play us out. What does that mean?
What does it mean?
I've never seen this before.
What the fuck are you talking about?
We're just quoting Bill O'Reilly's
It's a Bill O'Reilly meltdown.
Crash Out. Hello, Steven Hale here from the Nashville Banner, and I am joined by a man who has seen enough and a woman who has been to each of the 3 Grand Divisions in the past 36 hours, 24 hours?
Yeah.
It's Steve Cavendish and Sarah Grace Taylor.
It would have been funny if you said I was Dave Wasserman.
Yeah, that would be fun if we had Dave Wasserman on.
If we had Dave Wasserman
You've
here.
seen enough. You were
this
ready
would
to
be a
call
much
it
better
last night. So last night we had primary elections in Tennessee, and I'm going to run through some headlines and then we'll get into it. So first off, Tennessee will elect a woman as governor for the first time. Marsha Blackburn won the Republican nomination over John Rose, and Memphis City Council member Jerry Green won the Democratic nomination. The big surprise of the night, Trump endorsed incumbent Andy Ogles, was explicitly not reelected. He was beat by Charlie Hatcher, who got late endorsements from Governor Bill Lee and former Governor Bill Haslam. And then we're also going to talk about primaries in Districts 4, 6, and 7. We got state legislative races, judicial elections were last night. It was a whole bunch of stuff. But first, we have to hear about Sarah's excellent adventure. You were jet-setting around the state yesterday with the Blackburn campaign and her entourage. Was that your first time on a private jet?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's a jet. Like, I don't know what the threshold is. It was a pretty small plane.
Private plane.
So the Blackburn campaign took a handful of reporters, including me and our photographer, Martin. On Wednesday, we left and went east to Bluntville and then drove to Mountain City so that she could do a literal Mountain City to Memphis to talk about how much she's talking to Tennesseans every day.
Yes.
And we went to several campaign events with her, flew to Memphis that night, then to Wilson County, then to Knoxville, where she hosted her party in the last, 36 hours. We got back about an hour and a half ago.
Every statewide candidate does the Memphis to Mountain City thing. How much do you think candidates just hate the fact that they find out exactly how wide our state is at that point in the campaign?
I think the problem is that they're alliterative. And I think one city has to change its name so that they can't keep saying that.
So they don't feel the need
Yeah.
to do it. It would be nice if we had like a circle state.
Yes.
So
Redistrict the state.
I mean, why not? We're redrawing every other line. So I want let's just start from the beginning. First of all, are we talking? Is this John Toon? Where were you flying out of? Where did you go yesterday morning, and how did this?
So
start?
Wednesday afternoon, we met in Nashville. It's like at B&A, but in the back, yeah. And Marsha and her team were on a plane separately. The reporters were on a plane. We all got a chance to ride a stint with her and talk to her, and we had a pretty substantive interview that I won't spoil entirely because we're going to write about it for Monday. But
NashvilleBanner.com.
Did the planes fly in formation?
No, they were kind of separate. Sometimes we had a lag.
Now, was the plane big enough for you to write questions on an orange and roll it up to the candidate and have them roll it back?
I don't know that she's seen The West Wing.
Okay, let's see.
I'm so glad you put some context on that insane question you just asked. No, when I talked to Blackburn, we were sitting right next to each other. We were closer than you and I are right now. These are pretty small planes.
Yeah.
I sat next to her, talked to her, and she gave some pretty substantive policy answers.
Mm-hmm. So 2 planes. How did this all come about? I know you've been obviously covering this race the whole time, but just in terms of letting people kind of behind the scenes here of how you and some other reporters ended up on this tour of the state. They kind of invited a group of people to come along with them for the last day. You've been talking to them. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, we'd been talking to their campaign. They set this Knoxville election party pretty early, and they had invited us to do that and see some of the behind the scenes. We went to the air quote war room where they were looking at polling numbers and that kind of stuff. So we knew that we'd probably do some version of that. The travel and going to all these cities thing we heard pretty recent weeks. And I won't speculate on the selection of which reporters went and that kind of thing, but it was a process. And I think the point of it was definitely for Marsha to advertise going and talking to people. And something she and I talked about is that The Senate has been in session 1,900 hours this year. It is the longest they've ever done it in any given year.
Okay, I was going to say, I have to confess, I don't know how many hours there are.
For context, it was 800 or 900 hours in the House this year. Okay. So double plus.
I was going to say that I wish the House would pay a little more attention to the Senate.
Well, and so, Blackburn has been, whatever your other feedback, and we all know that there was discussion this year about whether she was around enough campaigning this summer, if she was accessible.
Right.
This was, I think, a pretty clear response to that criticism that she wanted to show, like, here's me doing stuff. We go to a barbecue joint, we go to these small events in all these places on the run up to the election night.
Yeah.
It was still like pretty selectively Republican groups she was going into, but it was also a primary. So that's not insane to think that that's what she would do.
Right. So, I want to get to kind of the results and your guys' takes on it. But quickly, you mentioned going to a barbecue joint and her talking to Tennesseans. What was it like to be in that barbecue place and the other events you went to and see her kind of talking to people?
Yeah. And like I said, I'm going to have a story about this Monday, but I think it's innately weird, no matter who you are, to show up to a rural barbecue joint called Jailhouse Barbecue and go in. There's about 6 diners. You're wearing a pantsuit. You show up with an entourage in SUVs. Like, that is odd. I don't care what the candidate is.
Yeah, you make a bit of a scene.
And maybe I'm, like, cynical because I'm a political reporter, but, like,
no.
That to me just looks so staged, even though the people there are not staged, but, like, the event is. So it was odd to see that kind of interaction. But then, like, to see her talk to more her crowd voters. We went to like the Shelby County GOP and she's like talking to voters individually. Like, it seems more organic than like, hi, are you enjoying your sandwich? I'm running for governor. Yeah. Which is just like odd.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, weird no matter who does it.
Yeah.
But I will say that at a Wilson County event yesterday, she was queuing up one of her kind of repeated talking points. And then after she said it, there was a table where a gentleman said in a guttural voice I'm not going to be able to replicate, yeah, buddy, after she said it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go talk to him afterward. So she has normal Tennesseans who she is talking to, and they're quite enthusiastic about her.
I look forward to hearing more about that guy in your story.
Important note, how was the Jailhouse Barbecue?
Oh, it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty solid. This is Ron Ramsey's barbecue joint that he likes, so he recommended it. And we all sat there and talked about the days that he was in the legislature.
So let's get to the results. Marsha Blackburn obviously won. Were you all surprised at all not by her winning necessarily, she's been the favorite, but like how it turned out? There was a lot of talk, and Sarah, you did reporting on this in the weeks leading up to this election, of like, is it closer than we think? Is it not? Whose polling is right? All that stuff. So like, what did you think once everything settled last night?
So the Blackburn campaign pretty spot on guessed how much she would get, the percentage of the vote that she would get. They underestimated what Rose got. They had him in the 20s. So I think like they were probably somewhat deliberately putting out that he would not perform as well as he thought he would, and did.
So she won with at least 43% of the vote. He got 32.9% of the vote.
Right. And they had the polling where she would get like 43, and then Fritz and Rose would be really close in the mid-20s, basically, is what they put out. At the same time, Rose put out a poll that said that Blackburn and Rose would be in the mid to low 30s, and they were within like 3 points of each other. Fritz also in the 20s. Obviously, they both were right and wrong, which is Rose performed in the 30s like he thought he would. Blackburn performed in the 40s like she thought she would, and they both underestimated each other in their polls that they put out, which is to say polls are fake and skewed on purpose.
I was going to say it's an art, not a science, but I don't even, it may not be much of an art. It's more of some kind of...
we're well past the science and maybe past the art.
Well, and a sub-take of that is also that Fritz performed better than I think a lot of people thought he would by getting into the 20s. He did not perform as competitively with Rose as it would have benefited Blackburn to paint a couple weeks ago. But also, since he picked up more than anyone thought, he certainly split the vote in a way where Rose might have been more competitive.
Well, I was just going to ask that. I mean, so Fritz ends up with almost 168,000 votes, 23.4% of the vote. You know, obviously you can't just assume all of that would go to one candidate or the other, but the math of it is that if you took him out of it, that's enough votes to potentially have swung it. What do we think about that?
He's so different than Rose that I do think there's like a section of voters who showed up because they like Fritz and would not have voted for Rose or Blackburn. Certainly some might have voted for Blackburn, but you think pretty naturally that the the decision chart for a Republican voter was, do I want to vote for Blackburn, who's the heir apparent here, or not? If not, is it Fritz or Rose? So if you take Fritz out of the equation, naturally, I think more of that would have flowed to Rose.
And if you look at those initial polls, where they had Blackburn with like a 60-point lead, and we've been talking about those polls for
A year and a half.
Yeah, those are name ID polls, and so it kind of show kind of the strength of her name and the strength of Marsha Blackburn and as many Fox News appearances as she's done, and as kind of ubiquitous as she's been in Tennessee. It's interesting that she ends up in a 3-person race, kind of under 50%, because to what Sarah's saying, I do think there was this decision tree of Marsha or not Marsha, and if it was not Marsha, it just makes you wonder what a 2-person race would have looked like, whether it was Fritz or Rose. That would have been a really interesting kind of moment, I think, for the Republican Party.
Well, and someone said last night, like, well, why would Fritz, who's like anti-establishment, ultimately not drop out and let Rose have it, right? And I think they're so fundamentally different kinds of Republican. Like, certainly Blackburn is closer to Rose than Fritz is to Rose. So I just don't think there was a world where he was ever going to acquiesce.
Yeah, I do think that's an analytical mistake we can all make at times, which is when you have these like two, let's call them underdog candidates that you assume, well, if they just combined their forces, they would win. But it's like, by almost the very nature of not being the main favorite candidate, like they are more idiosyncratic or more different. They're not like necessarily overlapping in that way. But before we get to the next race, I want to hear a little bit about the event you were at last night, because you were at the Marsha victory party, as it turned out to be. And you have a quote here that is pretty memorable. You said she walked out after declaring victory, walked out to Rocky Top and said, in her speech, if you're someone who wants a God-fearing, freedom-loving, flag-waving, guitar-picking, NASCAR-loving, vol-cheering, pro-life, low-tax beacon of freedom, you are in the right place.
You have any idea how many times I had to ask other people to shut up and let me re-listen to that quote and get all of those hyphenated things?
Well, and just if I'm going to edit, I will say we do loving twice.
Also freedom twice, because she says freedom loving and then beacon of freedom. So not to nitpick, but I did think about that.
So she's describing herself here or the state?
Yeah.
Both.
Yes, and the state under her governorship is how I interpreted the way she put it.
But yeah, so that's what she had to say. What else was memorable about the
I wonder if that Vol Levin perked up for any of the folks in her Mississippi State alumni group chat.
There were such loud cheers in that Knoxville crowd when she said that, by the way.
I mean,
like, absurd. Maybe more than when she said she won. Like, I'm not sure, but the Vols thing really hit, for sure.
Yeah. Had to do it to him. But yeah, so I mean, you've been to many of these things in your career as a reporter, but any takeaways from that before we move on?
I think, and again, I'll kind of get to this Monday, but she certainly ran publicly in her speeches and I'm using quotes when I say this, communist and socialist threats to Tennessee, and then like diehard conservative, it all stops at the Tennessee state line. Like, this is how we're going to be, everyone else be damned. And the speech last night was 100% of that. It was, we have to safeguard this conservative vision of guitar picking, NASCAR loving Tennessee against these California libs moving here, was the undertone. And Freddie O'Connell. She took a pot shot at him in the middle of that too. But.
Nice. So real quick, we have not talked much about Democratic candidate Jerry Green. So she got 69% of the vote, 244,000 votes for her. There were 4 other candidates in that primary. So, what do you make of her going into the general election? Obviously, Marsha Blackburn's going to be the heavy favorite. Republican or a Democrat hasn't won statewide here in, I should have looked this up, but a while. But yeah, so what should people know about Jerry Green? She's from Memphis, council member there.
Yeah, she's like, I think like a pretty normie local government person, because she's been a public defender and now she's on the city council. So I think she's like very much the opposite. She's not going to run, I wouldn't think, a very national message driven campaign. It's going to be more like local government, but she's just such an underdog that I think a lot of what she's going to have to do is respond to Blackburn innately. So
Yeah.
that might push her to do something that's a little outside of her wheelhouse, which is that national argument.
Yeah, and I suppose her campaign and Democrats in general will be hoping they can ride a potential sort of midterm Democratic wave election to, if not a miracle victory, then a higher vote total than they might otherwise get.
It was interesting. Jerry Green was actually we did a candidate questionnaire with her, and that ended up being, I think, on a pretty big election day with a lot of stories that were getting a lot of traffic. Was, I think, the third or fourth biggest story on our site yesterday, because I think a lot of people don't know her.
Sure.
And we're wanting to kind of familiarize yourself with positions and whatever else.
I also think she might benefit from being in Memphis specifically, because with the redistricting this year, Justin Pearson, who is very compelling to a lot of people, also being on a ticket out
also
there.
Also won last night. Yeah.
Right. I think there's a lot of attention in Memphis and a lot of effort to get all Democrats across the state, but particularly that crowd, to show up and vote the 9th congressional district. So she might ride a little bit of that and do better than a Democrat might have otherwise.
Let's hit the Republican primary, or both primaries really, but first the Republican primary in District 5, where Andy Ogles was defeated in a big upset that was even getting some national media attention last night because it was unexpected. He's an incumbent, big Trump endorsed, and very Trump-like. I get the sense he's trying to out-Trump sometimes in the way he is on social media and his public statements. Got beat by Charlie Hatcher. Was this as surprising to you guys as it was to me and I think a lot of other people?
No, I think polling showed for a long time, and the numbers I heard this week were that he was polling at 41%, which 41% for an incumbent is not good.
And in a two-candidate race.
In a two-candidate race, and he just frankly is very disliked in Middle Tennessee, so the new district may have helped him, and there was speculation about that because he was drawn to get away from some of that. But when the numbers came back and he was already behind and Williamson County wasn't even in, I thought it was pretty obvious from the jump that he wasn't going to come back last night.
Yeah, the early numbers were not good for him. He needed some kind of padding in order to kind of fend off Hatcher on election day. Just didn't have it. The thing I thought about the district when it was redrawn was that as significantly rural as the new 5th is, and it goes up through Middle Tennessee up to Clarksville, hangs a left, goes to the Mississippi River, and then down to Memphis. I mean, once you get 10 miles north of Memphis, that's all farmland. And you have a former ag commissioner who was on the ballot, who's a pretty genial sort of figure. I mean, Hatcher comes off really well in his conversations and in his advertisements. I thought that was a terrible draw for Ogles because this is a district that didn't know him, and so he was an incumbent with virtually none of the powers of incumbency.
But also, he's so disliked. I was talking to a Republican voter who lives in Wilson County yesterday, who was texting me, "Is Ogles going to lose?" And I said, "I don't know. It's not looking good for him." And he said, "Well, he's not my representative anymore, so I don't get to vote against him, but I really hope he loses." That is very much, I think, the sentiment.
This gets to the question I was going to ask you both about this, because I was getting all these texts last night and this morning from friends and family not in the state who were seeing that this guy, Andy Ogles, lost, and they, to people who aren't here, they were like, wow, this, I mean, for people listening to this, they're probably familiar, but I mean, this is a guy who says there's not a place for Muslims in American society, not a place for gay people in America. We need to denaturalize and deport the mayor of New York and federally investigate the mayor of Nashville. He's a lot all the time, and so people that have heard of him that don't live here saw this defeat and were coming to me like, wow, is that it seems like Tennessee voters have sort of turned on either sort of this MAGA figure. I want you guys to help me understand how what should we read into this and what shouldn't we? How much of Ogles' unpopularity was about sort of his hardcore kind of further right, whether it's anti-gay, anti-Muslim stuff, and how much of it was just something else and they like Hatcher more, and how much difference is there really between the two of them?
I think it was almost, I mean, Steve is probably right about the farm stuff helping Hatcher. I think the vast majority of it was probably anti-Ogles voting. I do not think that means it's anti-Trump voting, and I don't think we should try to conflate that being true in future Tennessee primaries. I mean, Blackburn said Trump at every speech I heard her do. Like, that's still very popular. Johnny Garrett, like, there are other people who benefited from that. But I think what it means going forward is that Mulder's chances in the general have gone way down. Because he would have been an anti-Ogles option, and now he has no Ogles to run against. So the idea that that was maybe a flippable district has gone out the window, I think.
Yeah, Ogles, I think the redraw was probably better for Ogles in the general, but terrible for him in the primary. And so I got a piece of mail in my box a couple months ago, and it was from John Rose. And John Rose was telling me about all the good things that John Rose is doing, except where it comes off as campaign literature. But it was actually franked mail from his congressional district, because I live in the 6th. But now I live in the 4th. I live one street into the 4th in the redrawn lines. And Andy Ogles could send out franked things to his old district in the 5th, but not to his new one. It's not like he could preemptively kind of blanket it with some of the powers of that. And that's important because Ogles is a terrible fundraiser. He's not a particularly great campaigner. And I think all of those things finally caught up with him in a set of circumstances that kind of hit every one of his weaknesses.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw Sarah Grace made a face when I called him an incumbent, and I assume this is why, right? They sort of stripped some of the powers of incumbency when they redrew all these lines, and it didn't make it a totally blank canvas, but it changed it. You mentioned Chaz Mulder real quick. That's his Democratic opponent, Charlie Hatcher's Democratic opponent now. A mayor who was also running in a crowded Democratic primary, so we'll see like what kind of votes he can pull in. But what do we think about him?
I think it's going to be tough now that he doesn't have Ogles to run against. I think that was his mass appeal.
And this district doesn't know him very well either. He's going to have to. The hope was that in a district where he was in the old 5th, where he would have been better known, because it would have had a lot of kind of where he has run and been a public figure. That would have been preferable, and then he would have picked up that slice of Nashville, which was probably going to go with him. Now that slice of Nashville's gone, and he has this whole brand new district. The problem for him is going to be that the DCCC was going to put a lot of money into a race in the old 5th, and I think that's one of the reasons why Republicans looked at this and are like, okay, that's our most vulnerable one. So if we change the district, then we can negate that, whatever that cash advantage that Mulder might have had. The DCCC was still putting out statements last night that, focused on that Mulder race, but it remains to be seen kind of like how big are they going to play in there when there's a lot of different places, and this one looks less flippable. Just in terms of kind of resources. I don't know how much they're going to play in the 5th.
I don't think there's any district in Tennessee that has a close enough race that we're going to see anything like the special election in 7 last year or what they were planning in the 5th. I think the DCCC is going to look back over that and probably not see anything flippable here.
Yeah. So let's run through some of these other races a little more briefly. The U.S. Senate race will be a rematch between Bill Hagerty and Democratic candidate Marquita Bradshaw. They raced against each other in 2020. That's a statewide race, obviously, so similar in some ways to the governor's matchup. Congressional District 4, Scott Desjardins reelected again, and renominated, and will face Victoria Broderick, the Democratic candidate. Any thoughts on that before I move on?
Desjardins has been there a long time. He does have a new district map as well, but I don't think he is in trouble.
Yeah, Mike Cortez was in the 5th. He's a Metro Council member, and was going to be running against Mulder, and then he switched over to the 4th when they did the redistricting, and I think he had raised a ton of money. I think he's raised like $750,000 or so. The problem with Cortez was that his natural constituency is Nashville, and
He lost
this
that,
district is decidedly not. And he did not do well enough in that. He needed to just put up a huge lead in Nashville and then hang on in some areas where he's not as well known. And so we've seen this with Democrats a lot. A Nashville well-funded Democrat gets into some of these rural races and just cannot pull it off.
House District 6, you mentioned Johnny Garrett earlier. Johnny Garrett beats Van Hillary, and this was the battle of the AI ads that we were following so closely with sort of amusement and horror at what they were doing. So Johnny Garrett, a state legislator now nominated for this congressional seat, will face Mike Crawley on the Democratic side. You obviously have spent a lot of time watching Johnny Garrett at the State House. What do you think about this race?
I think, it's a testament to him because when they redrew the congressional lines, he lost a lot of his home area that he did represent in the State House. But he still did very well. Part of that was because he hitched his wagon to Blackburn, I think. So they did a lot of campaigning together, and therefore he benefited from her.
Right.
But he's also like very much the thing I was saying of don't read too far into Ogles because he is Trump and conservative and say it all the time
Right.
and all the things that Ogles is, but stopping shy of like picking a group and saying they shouldn't be allowed in the country. Maybe that's not entirely true, but he does handle himself
I take your point, though.
differently,
Yeah, like
and he has less like opposition than Ogles.
Right.
The Ogles race was personal.
Garrett got screwed in the redistrict, and behind the scenes, was saying,
Right.
I'm taking one for the team here. He was not public in like criticism of the redistricting, even though he wanted a different looking district. He wanted the one that had most of his state legislative seat, and he went out and did the work. Yep. Went out and worked really hard in that district and was kind of everywhere.
Well, I was just going to say, what should people know about Mike Crawley? It's going to be a long shot, but that's the Democratic candidate. What's his deal?
I just think that district is so unwinnable. Like, I think of the ones we've talked about, maybe the safest other than arguably Desjardins, but with his new district, he doesn't have the incumbent factor that we talked about.
Yeah, six is less winnable than 7, and 7's not winnable. So
I do think 7's the most, and here's our segue.
Yep.
I think 7 might be the most flippable, and it is not flippable. And it was interesting, the Democratic primary itself, where Vincent Dixie, who's a state rep in Nashville, and Darden Copeland, businessman, both of whom ran last year in the special election for 7, were up against each other again, but this time it was new ground.
Right.
The implication to me was like, oh, okay, Copeland did better outside of Nashville, so he'll pick up a little bit. It's going to be close, is what I was thinking going into it. And he ran away with it. You were saying he learned his lesson and did a very good job campaigning in Nashville, apparently, because he even won Davidson, which is...
Yeah, so Darden Copeland won the Democratic primary in the 7th, just about 40% of the vote. Matt Van Epps on the Republican side was unopposed.
Yeah.
So he's
But he's in a weird
renominated
position of like being an incumbent less than a year into his job. Mm-hmm. So he is an incumbent.
But
he's a Republican in a district that will probably vote Republican.
Right.
But he's not exactly like a household name yet, I don't think.
Yeah. We should touch on a state house primary that was going on in Nashville State House District 59, where Mark Proctor, in a close one, won that primary on the Democratic side. And what'd you take away from that?
I mean, those...
It was another 4-person race.
State house races, primaries, are really hard to guess because it's just not a ton of votes ultimately.
Right.
And there were 4 like reasonably qualified people in the community who were running, so like anybody could have run away with it, I think. But Proctor was the heir apparent who Caleb Himmer, who's leaving the seat, had endorsed and kind of set up early on to run. And I think he's also he's hitting the public safety stuff that's important in that neighborhood, and he just resonated early. I was not surprised by him winning.
That race got surprisingly nasty for a primary. Especially like kind of a multi-candidate primary. Usually when they're in a multi-candidate primary, it tends to make things like a little, like you don't want to come off as like the super negative person. But there were a bunch of attack ads on Angie Lawless about her support for Cade Cothran and looking for, like asking the judge for leniency when he was sentenced before he was ultimately pardoned by President Trump. And that stuff resonates. And then, Beth West was a pretty strong candidate. She ended up finishing third. She was a pretty strong candidate, and again, probably pulled some support away from Lawless that if she had a chance to beat Proctor.
And the thing about Beth West is I feel like, because she had endorsements from Representative Afton Bain and Gloria Johnson and like some people that have some pull if you're deciding who to vote for as a Democrat. But I think that more, and like Miriam Abafazi, and I think that more activist crowd is probably not as popular in that corner of Nashville as Proctor, who's like a former highway patrolman and like a little more, establishment is maybe not the right word, but like maybe more of a moderate Democrat.
Right. Yeah, very tied into the Bredesen camp.
Yeah. So the other contest, quick, was just there were judicial elections. All the higher court judges, appellate court judges were retained, and then everyone else was unopposed. So not a whole lot to say there, but Mikey wrote that story up for us. Steve, any thoughts on judges?
Mikey got the short straw when he wrote that story. He knew he knew he did. The thing about the judicial elections in Tennessee is it's a retention election. It is almost impossible.
You have to opt out. It
is almost impossible to get a judge that way. I think that's only happened once in sort of Tennessee history. Ron Ramsey famously kind of went after some Supreme Court judges in the past and was not successful there. And there was no money put into these races. Mostly people just went in and said yes.
Sure, yeah. If I haven't heard something really crazy about this name, then I guess
it was across the board. Like every candidate got about 3/4 of the vote.
Yeah. So before we go, and I hope Sarah Grace let you get a nap or something. Or are you flying anywhere else? Where are you off to? Nowhere? No. Okay. Going into the general election, which we'll have plenty of time to think about this and talk about this, but like, what do you think some of the top sort of issues are going to be that we're going to be talking about? I mean, this is also we're in midterm season, so a lot of national politics stuff probably ends up trickling down to some of this. But what are one or two things you going into covering this that you think we're all going to be focused on?
I think affordability is going to be what every Democrat in every level talks about the most repeatedly over and over. I think protecting conservative values and that kind of more culture side is going to be, again, the
freedom,
through line on their
flags, guitars, NASCAR
right.
bulls.
But then, like, also immigration and public safety stuff are always issues that Republicans bring up. And particularly, I think on a Blackburn ticket, people below her are also going to go, oh, yeah, I'll just say what she's saying about that.
Yes, and I this isn't so much about a specific issue, but I think to the point you made about not reading too much into the Ogles race as it relates to sort of views about MAGA in Tennessee, there may be President Donald Trump's approval ratings are very low right now. There may be like a Democratic sort of midterm wave, but we see this over and over again, that people feel quite differently about the person they know who represents them than they do maybe about like these more general. So it wouldn't surprise me if you do have this national mood that's one way, but a lot of voters in Tennessee who are Republicans who go, oh, well, we know Marsha, or we know this guy, or I know Johnny Garrett. Their mood about the people here locally may not be reflected in the sort of potential wave we're seeing nationally.
I would also gamble, and no voting bloc is a monolith.
Sure.
But the Republicans who are tiring of Trump are mostly not living in Tennessee, if I had to guess.
That's a safe guess.
Yeah. I don't know that his approval has gone down here.
Sure.
But
yeah,
I will say this, every day something happens kind of with the Trump administration. They've been trying to get to some sort of midterms message for a year now. but particularly over the last 6 months with everything that's happened in Iran, and how that has aftershocks kind of along the economy. There was a jobs report here on Friday morning. Job growth unexpectedly sluggish. I think as long as those things continue, you're going to have Democrats that are hoping that Trump nationally will pull down Republican candidates. In Tennessee, that's a hard ask, but I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats trying to tie Republican candidates here to Trump and then run against Trump.
Yep, I would say that sounds like a safe bet. Thank you both for coming in. Sarah Grace, thanks for flying in, and for all the reporting. Thank you to Andrea Tudhope for producing, as always. If you're listening to this on our website, you should also subscribe to the podcast at the Banner & Company podcast feed, and we'll see you soon.